All right. Thanks everyone for joining our panel today. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many people know what a zk rollup is? Okay, and how many people know zk EVM? Okay, cool. So I think there will be some people who are not very familiar. So I think we can jump straight into the panel with that in mind. So I'm showing on the chart, I'm not sure if the panelists can see, I'm showing this very popular chart that Vitalik created a while back, describing different zk EVMs. But before that, can I get maybe one of you and then the other can chip in, just to give a quick explainer about what a zk rollup is. And then the other person can maybe extend that by explaining what a zk EVM is and what the different types are.
Maybe I can go first.
Okay, sure.
Maybe I'll first introduce myself first.
Yeah.
So my name is Keng. I'm from Tyco, a zk rollup, a layer 2 zk rollup. So yeah, we are a type 1 zk EVM. So as you can see on the chart, there is type 1, type 2, 2.5, 3, and 4, right? So Tyco is right at the top there with being type 1. So type 1 is Ethereum equivalent. That means we don't do any code changes to the core protocol. And yeah, so what this means for developers is that whatever they deploy on Ethereum, they can also deploy on Tyco without any code changes to their smart contracts. Yeah. Maybe you want to add
I
on
guess
to it?
for those who've not looked at the type, there's somewhat important, a good mental model to build is that type 1, type 2, type 2.5 to some extent, all those three don't require developers to change any line of code. So if they've written, I don't know, a few thousand lines of Solidity to write their protocol, they can just copy paste it from L1 to a zero knowledge rollup. Onwards, so type 3, type 4 requires some amount of change depending on the chain. So this is looking more like zkSync. But overall, the outlook of the zkVMs today, so Scroll, Tyco, Polygon zkVM, Kakarot, Linea, they target a level of compatibility that enables any dev to just write their code and not worry about the underlying rollup. This is kind of how it should be. And Tyco being type 1 has a bit even more compatibility, is being compatible even with the nodes. This is more like there are many personas, right? There's the dev who writes Solidity and then deploys to a chain, and then there's infra players. So being type 1, you can kind of plug and play Etherscan. You're supposed to be at least able to just use Geth or Reth, which are the software to run a node. So this is nice. And other zkVMs don't allow for that, but let's say for a dev, it doesn't change anything.
Okay, just to rewind a little bit, because I think we skipped the question about zk rollups. For those who don't know what a zk rollup is and why it matters to Ethereum or just to blockchains in general, can I get maybe Keng to kind of give your Eli 5, explain like I'm 5 answer, or at least maybe 15 for the people here to maybe understand zk rollup if they didn't know anything.
Right. So to know about why zk rollups exist, you need to also know about the other type of rollup, which is the optimistic rollups. So the main difference between optimistic rollups and zk rollups is the proofs, right? Proof being how do you verify if a block is valid or not, an L2 block is valid or not. So optimistic rollup just optimistically believes that all blocks are valid until someone submits a fraud proof. Or say, for example, I want to challenge that this block is actually invalid, and you will have to compute a fraud proof to argue that this block is invalid. But for zk rollups, we actually validate every single block such that we know that every block is valid. So instead of believing that every block is valid, we submit a zero knowledge proof to prove that to prove the validity of each of these blocks.
Yeah, I guess the main attribute of a rollup is to save money on computation. So that's kind of, and then the ZK part is you save money, but you don't compromise on security. That's kind of my Eli.
So for any degens who spent upwards of 50 Ether to make a transaction, so the last couple of years, that's you probably understand why rollups matter. So I think we kind of, so Keng mentioned Taiko is a type 1 rollup. So for Ilyas, for Kakarot, like what type would it be?
So Kakarot can target type 2, type 2.5, or type 3. This is really a trade-off on what you want to achieve. So for example, if you're type 1, you can prove L1 blocks, but this is maybe a different activity. So for Kakarot, I think we're going to target type 2, which is essentially you have compatibility and almost equivalence. So you have the same gas accounting, you have the same, you don't compile EVM bytecode, you run it. So you have full compatibility on the language level. You have all the precompiled. The only thing that changes is maybe the underlying data structure. So the Merkle-Patricia tree that EVM uses is MPT with Ketchak as a hash function. You may want to swap Ketchak out with Poseidon and Pedescent to save money. So this is what Scroll is doing. This is what we're doing. It really depends what you want to achieve. And in the long run, in the short run, in the long run, I would say everyone wants to achieve type 1. Why? Because in the long game is to have this kind of standardization of all zkVMs. In the short run, we found out that proving Ketchak and all others non-ZK friendly things are very expensive. And so as a trade-off, you're free to roam around the types in some sense. The only type that's a bit harder to roam around with is type 4, because what you're essentially doing, so yeah, for the mental model, type 4 is really you take Solidity and you compile it to your own language. All the other types take Solidity and any other EVM language, Huff, Viper, etc., compile it to EVM machine code and then run it. So as long as you have this, you're kind of free in some sense to roam around and choose your trade-off. Do you want to be cheaper? Do you want to be faster? Do you want to be more equivalent? And all of this comes as a price.
And I think one thing we didn't mention is that you're a founder of Kakarot. So I think a very interesting kind of question to ask is like, what was the backstory for Kakarot? Like, how did it come to existence, and why did you choose to, be this type 2 to type 3 kind of rollup, and why build on Cairo VM, which maybe you can explain a little bit more later. But yeah, so like, what's the backstory? Like, how did it end up existing?
Okay, so the backstory is we're almost at the birthday, because it started in October 2022 as a hackathon project in Lisbon, in ETH Lisbon actually. The whole point, and I was new to Cairo as well. I was not so new to Zero Knowledge, but new to Cairo, and the promise was whatever you write in Cairo, so whatever targets the Cairo VM as the backend, is provable. So what Shah, one of the inventors of the Cairo VM, I think Danilo hinted at it during his talk, but essentially, if you write the instruction set, so if you write the EVM, if you write an EVM in Golang, and then add some RPC, you have Geth, which is the most used Ethereum node. But if you write the EVM in Cairo, what you get is a provable Geth, or like a provable EVM. So whatever transaction you run, so if I do a ERC20 transfer, I can prove it. So this was the dream. It was weird, and the dream was you can create a zkVM fast without being a cryptographer. This was kind of the promise. And then everyone gathered in the hacker house, and like the hacker house was 80 people, I think. We lived together for a week. I think 7 people were hacking on Kakarot: Danilo, Clement, Fresh Pizza, who to this day remains undoxed. No one knows his name. So yeah, so in 2 months we were able to achieve 100% upcode, and that's kind of my second point. Is the fun part of Cairo is it's quite a high level language. It's as hard as it was then. What you're actually doing is, and I don't know if people know Zeth here, but it doesn't matter. But essentially, what you have is kind of an intermediary VM. So you different ways to write an EVM. Like Taiko uses circuits, so their team has cryptographers. Our team doesn't yet. So I would say it's easier in a way to build with Cairo and Kakarot. So the backstory is we gathered at a hacker house, we hacked, we saw that it worked. In 2 months we had a working EVM. Then we kind of like solidified from the company and said, okay, let's see how far Cairo and this approach of a zkVM through an intermediary zero-knowledge virtual machine takes us, and go to production with it.
So it's literally been like a year only.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So next one's for Keng. So you mentioned Taiko is a type 1 rollup. So as Elias mentioned earlier, like a lot of other projects are starting with like kind of the lower types, you know, the type 2, 2.5, whereas Tycho is like going all the way straight to type 1. What was the rationale there for like making that decision, and what were some trade-offs that you had to make?
So actually, the previous the founders of Tycho were actually from Loopring. So Loopring is actually an application specific rollup. So maybe it could be classified as a type 4 or maybe yeah type 4 yeah that's not a generalized rollup, but yeah, but so from there we just decided to move on into a general zk rollup, I would say. And why type 1? We believe in like minimalism to the developers. We want them to have like literally zero code changes like when deploying on a rollup. So that's why we chose to go for like a type 1 zk VM.
And were there any trade-offs that you had to make when you decided to do type 1?
Yeah, so type 1 would mean that we have to cover every single operation, I guess. We have to write every single operation in as circuits to complete the zk VM. That means the more like the expensive functions like your kachek 256. We also have to write those in circuits, and this would mean that our provers will have to spend significantly much more resources to prove a single block, I would say. And but this benefits the developer because they don't have to care so much about edge cases. Yeah, so it might seem small, but for example, if your kachek 256 hash function if your kachek 256 hash function's replacement actually costs more gas on other zk VMs, existing protocols that use the existing hash function might actually exceed the block gas limit, causing your transaction to like fail, and so your dApp might actually fail to work on the other type of zk VMs. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So shifting a little bit, so my understanding is both rollups are in testnet at this point.
We're close to testnet.
Okay, close testnet. Okay, well, still testnet then. So I guess the question would be when mainnet, or what would be the roadmap towards getting to mainnet?
Yeah, maybe I'll take this one first. So currently, Tycho is on its 5th iteration of testnet called Jolnia, up to mainnet, which will be about Q2 next year. We plan to launch with the proto-dank sharding upgrade on Ethereum. In our next testnet, we plan to release like this contestable rollup as part of like a multi-prover rollup. So we want to not only use zk rollups, but maybe we would want to try including multi-proofs. Like some blocks could be like proven optimistically, and maybe every 100th block we submit a validity proof. So we don't have to spend so much resources on like submitting zk proofs, and that might like make the blockchain faster, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess it's always tricky to announce mainnet. Our goal, basically, the steps we need to follow are pass all the Ethereum Foundation EVM tests. So there is kind of because the EVM is an instruction set, so you can implement it. But then, since this is decentralized, what is the authority that can look at your execution or code and say, okay, this is an EVM. Like, what makes it an EVM? So my belief is that if you implement all the official tests that all the clients run, but you adapt them to your zkVM kind of context, when you pass it, you have a working EVM, so you feel kind of safe to kind of go to an audit, go to testnet, go to mainnet. So we're finishing that up now. So I would expect Q2 next year that at least we'll have, I mean, at least December we'll have much more clarity that then I can look back and say, okay, I was wrong to say Q2 or I was right. So I will say, I think that I'm right to say Q2 now, and I reserve the right to be wrong.
I think it's Q2 for both next year. Okay, cool.
Yeah, Q2 minus 1 day.
Hopefully.
And then, well, the topic of the panel is state of zk rollup. So I don't want to like zoom in just Kakarot and Tycho. One obvious thing that we see is that right now, when it comes to the actual market, pretty much, I think L2 Beat says it's like 85% of the market is using optimistic rollups. That's Arbitrum optimism base. From your points of view, do you see, when do you see, if ever, zk rollups would catch up to optimistic rollups, and what would it take to get there?
But for example, on the statistics, because optimistic base and Arbitrum have 85% of market share in terms of TVL. But in terms of activity, the top three is Ethereum, zkSync, Starknet, for example, in terms of TPS. So then arguably you're asking, okay, who are making those transactions? Are they real apps or airdrop hunters? I think part of everything, but you could argue then that other rollups should attract also airdrop hunters. Because Optimism has retroactive funding, so any chain. But so I think that's the first point. So I think Optimist Rollup have the dominion because they've been here first and working first, partially because they launched an EVM and said we will have fraud proofs later, which is kind of really smart because they had a centralized sequencer. They know that everything works, and then people trust them. So I think it was nice. And now, after 3 or 4 years, Optimism has fraud proof, or is going to, and then they will eventually incorporate zero knowledge proofs. That's kind of for the thing. The state of the market is optimistic rollup dominate, but zk rollups are on the rise. And I think the only factor is how fast, how cheap, and how reliable it is. So we've known zk VMs and even zero knowledge rollups to have pretty bad UX over the past year because the systems were kind of like coming to fruition. And mainly because you cannot launch a zero knowledge rollup and say, I will have proofs later. It doesn't make sense. So it was it's how it is, but I think very, very soon, so in the coming 2 or 3 years, the landscape is going to completely change. We're seeing this because OP stack are all already looking for a proof. And I think it's gonna look like that.
Anything to add, Kang?
Yeah, so like whether zk rollups will catch up with optimistic rollups, I think it's just a matter of time. I think first of all, you got to have like good dApps on the ecosystem. So I personally feel like why Arbitrum blew up was because of GMX and how it supports like high frequency perpetual trading, and I think that attracted a lot of traders and thus like a lot of TVL. I think on zkSync era there is a protocol called like Maverick protocol. It's like a concentrated liquidity protocol where you can set like bounds and also helps to shift your liquidity according to the direction of a price. So these sorts of like innovation that help to solve problems and help to make like capital more efficient. I think these are like key factors to attract more users and liquidity to your platform, especially in the long term. Like in the short term, yes, you can come up with like airdrop campaigns and stuff like that. And the success of these campaigns are actually pretty big. Like even like a Galaxy task, which is like a So Galaxy is like a platform where if you complete certain on-chain actions or like follow Twitter, blah blah blah, you get like certain points or when you complete these quests. And actually for Tycho it worked pretty well. In our third testnet we launched a Galaxy campaign and it like caused our user base to grow by like 2 times, which was crazy. There was like 2 times more work for us like in a short period of time. But yeah, so yeah, back to my original point, it's all about the the apps that are building on top of in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Okay, and so I'll just ask one specific question to each of you before we open it up to the audience, if you have time. So maybe first for Keng. Tycho's been kind of like talking a lot about based rollup. Can you explain to the audience what a based rollup is and why Tycho is doing that?
So like a base rollup, this term was coined by, if I'm not wrong, like Justin Drake. So basically a base rollup is a rollup where the L2 blocks are sequenced on a L1. And why we chose to do this is also part of our permissionless philosophy. In order to have like a permissionless proposers and block proposers, we need to be a based rollup. And why a permissionless rollup is important is because we want to decentralize MEV. We want to make sure that people can contribute and people can like earn fees from the network and not just the protocol. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And for Elias, so Kakarot's building on top of Cairo VM. Some developers have told me that one issue they have with Cairo is that it keeps changing over time, although apparently that the rate has slowed down. So maybe what are some challenges, if any, on building on Cairo? And at the same time, what are some benefits of doing that?
Right. I think it's true that there are many breaking changes very often. I was talking to one of the creators of Cairo earlier, and he was mentioning this trade-off between stabilization and innovation. So it's hard. So if you look at, for example, the forums on Starknet, people are saying, hey guys, my application broke because one of the API changed in the latest patch or in the latest upgrade. And then right next line, someone is saying, hey guys, why isn't this done already? Like a new feature. So people are asking new features and people are asking for stabilization. So I think it's hard. The challenges for us is that we migrate often and also we have to think ahead, talk to the teams that are making. So we talk with Starkware, talk with Starknet Foundation, talk with the people that develop SDKs, kind of voice our concerns. What is nice is, for example, Starknet and then Cairo is able to kind of learn from the limitations of EVM and then build on top. So like good examples were native account abstraction, multi-core, and also this is also not known by many people, but in Cairo and more precisely Starknet, there is this system of class. So every contract is firstly a class, and then you can instantiate your class. So it means that, for example, in EVM, when you deploy ERC20, that's the standard, every time you deploy the same, so you bloat your chain with similar code. So you duplicate. In Starknet, actually what you do is once you declare the ERC20 standard, and then whenever you want to deploy it, you kind of tell the chain, please, new ERC20. So it's kind of like more lean. So all these innovations come at a cost, which is instability the first 3 years. So we're going through that process. At first, when I started Cairo, the language looked like assembly. Now it looks like Rust. When we started, the TPS was 0.3. Now it's 100. It's moving forward. It's breaking things. We are annoyed some days. So yeah, the Cairo dev is very annoyed one day on two, and then the second day, they're so happy because we have generic types or like so many things. So, and I'm writing Cairo so that people can write Solidity. So in a way, I'm like double brain and like betting on Cairo, but also I'm such a EVM moderately maxi, but I think EVM is gonna dominate the space mostly through innovation. So I'd say, yeah, it's a bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde every day.
Thanks. I think that's very enlightening. I think we probably can have time for one audience question. So if anyone has any, please raise your hand. The first one gets to ask the question. All right, I think you have probably answered very well. Okay, we do have one question. Yeah, we can take this mic.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your talk. I was enjoying it very much. So listening to you, is there any use case, application, or service that you are more excited about in the future using a ZK rollup?
At least From what I'm seeing, I really enjoy account abstraction on rollups because, at least for zkSync and Kakarot and Starknet, they were able to incorporate into the protocol account abstraction. What it means in very, very concrete terms is my wallet uses my phone's secure enclave and not a 12-word seed. So I never need to write somewhere 12 words, and I can never self-rect myself, which happened quite a bit. So this I enjoy, for example. So this is one of the things I enjoy, and I think 4337, so it's the adaptation of account abstraction on mainnet Ethereum, is good, but it's not good enough. So this is kind of what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think to add on, like account abstraction will open a lot of like doors, especially in terms of like gaming. If you combine account abstraction with low transaction fees, you can actually have on-chain games where users don't even have to realize that they are transacting on-chain, and like with the benefits of decentralization and ownership of assets. Yeah, that's probably what I'm looking to see, not only on Tyco, but like in Web3 in general. Yeah.
All right, so I think that's about all the time we have. Please give a round of applause to the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you to our two speakers and our one moderator. We really appreciate an insight into the ZK ecosystem. All right.